Haruki Murakami does not like all the weak modern authors that are flooding the space. And today we are going to hear Murakami talk at length how to become a strong writer with fortitude. We live in an artistically pessimistic culture where there are so many writers who love to sit and complain about, oh my God, all the readers are so dumb, no one's buying my book. And that is the exact opposite energy that we need if we are going to create a literary renaissance. And I know so many writers who want the persona, they want the fame, they want their book to be published and read, but they are only putting in 10% of the effort that authors for the last millennia have put in. And this is comical because if you look at professional athletes, and the amount of effort that they put in, usually from a young age, with their parents putting them in youth sports, and then high school, then college, then university, if they make it to the top level, they have organizations dumping millions of dollars into their career and studying data analytics and everything that you can imagine to optimize them and make them better. They are not like the athletes from 1910. And as a group of authors, are we doing the same thing? Are we different? Have we upgraded in a similar manner? And if we haven't, what is the path to doing that? Because MFA programs, endowments, your local writing group, they are not going to inject you with the steroids like the Dallas Cowboys are injecting into the asses of all their players. So today and Murakami are going to give you some of the secret juice so that you can get your shit together and get on bookshelves across the world. And if you guys don't already know, my name is Ian, and here on Right Conscious, we cover everything related to Haruki Murakami. In the playlist down below, you will find videos on Murakami's books, his life, and writing advice he gives to blossoming authors like you and I. And so, my God, enough from me. Let us now hear from Murakami. I have but one answer, and one very simple one, and this is how and what you need to do to become a novelist. You have to become physically fit. You need to become more robust and physically strong and make your body your ally. Most people think that since the work of a novelist just involves sitting at a desk and writing, it has nothing to do with physical stamina. They seem to think that as long as you have enough strength in your fingers to tap away at a computer keyboard or write on paper with a pen, that's all you need. There's still a deep-rooted sense that writers are, in the first place, unhealthy, antisocial, and unconventional. So maintaining good health or physical fitness is beside the point. And to some extent, I can understand that objection. Such a stereotypical image of writers is not easily overcome. However, if you try writing yourself, you'll no doubt understand that sitting at a desk in front of a computer screen, or even at an empty orange crate with manuscript paper on top, there's no difference. Every day for 5 or 6 hours, focused solely on creating a story, requires an extraordinary amount of physical strength. When you are young, this might not be so hard. In your 20s and 30s, you are brimming with vitality and your body doesn't complain when it's overworked. Focus and concentration, too, are relatively easy to summon up when needed and can be maintained at a high level. It's truly wonderful to be young. But generally speaking, once you reach middle age, unfortunately, physical strength declines, dynamic strength deteriorates, and you lose stamina. Your muscles atrophy, and you put on unneeded pounds. As far as our bodies go, the bitter truth is that it's easy to lose muscles and easy to put on weight. And to make up for that decline, sustained, self-directed effort is needed to maintain one's physical strength. And as physical strength declines, there is a subtle decline in mental fitness too. Mental agility and emotional flexibility are lost. Once when I was interviewed by a young writer, I declared that once a writer puts on fat, it's all over. This was a bit hyperbolic, and of course there are some exceptions, but I do believe that for the most part it's true. Whether it is actual physical fat or metaphoric fat, most writers are able to compensate for this through improved writing technique or a more mature consciousness, but there is a limit to these as well. And so I don't want to sit here and hit you guys with the Andrew Huberman protocols and tell you that you have to wake up at 6 a.m. and have a good diet and do yada, yada, yada. But I am going to tell you that you are going to need to free up as much energetic space possible if you want to achieve your writing dreams. I have students who I teach at my high school, and they suck at football, you guys. But they have a meal prep service. Give them meals every single day with the perfect macros for their bulking. They have personal trainers. They have a masseuse. And this is all for the hope of maybe being able to walk on to a D3 school. And when I talk to writers and get to know them personally, I've talked to hundreds of you guys in my office hours over email, in the comment section. I've been a part of writing groups for over a decade. I spent 8 years in academia with writers, and I would say that writers in general are some of the more unhealthy, lazy, pessimistic, and loser people that I've ever had to surround myself with. And when there is any mention, not just of physical fitness, because that's easy. So here we go, everyone. Of course, if you participate in do some aerobic exercise for 30 to 60 minutes, your neurons are going to change. You're going to feel better in terms of mental energy. And even though I don't really advocate for aerobic running or really aerobic activity to look better aesthetically, it can, have a major impact on general longevity and your mental health. But it doesn't really matter. It could be running, yoga, weightlifting. You guys know that you should be doing that. And Murakami makes a great point in the sense that actually sitting down and doing something over the course of years is harder than you could ever imagine, because think about your life. You are self-employed, but you hired a boss to keep you accountable. They have created a structure and a company, and you sit and get whipped, and I do too, and told what to do every single day. And it's basically been like that our entire life. You had parents who told you go do XYZ in the public school system. Everything is structured. There's literally a bell that forces you to leave your classroom. It's the craziest thing as a teacher. I've had kids having breakthroughs. We're having the greatest conversation in the world. They're writing a poem that is great or revising something. Ding, and they go, Pavlov's dog, ruff, ruff, ruff. And suddenly they're leaving. They've been broken out of the spell. They've been broken out of the spell they were under, the flow state, the artistic state. And suddenly they're going to math class, or they're going to go play some dodgeball. It's crazy. And so when it comes to sitting down and writing, especially when you are a young writer, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to spend 5 hours writing a novel, and I basically know it's going to be crappy. There are very few first-time authors who write a novel, and the first thing that's long form they ever write is like a masterpiece, and people love it. I have a friend who had to write 10 novels to finally get a publishing deal. She didn't want to self-publish, so she just kept writing them until she finally got a deal. And it was for like $1,000. That was her advance. So if you are going to sit down at a desk alone without distractions every single day for a significant amount of time with no accountability, most people, 99% of people, fail. You have probably dreamed of being a writer. You have maybe written before. And when Murakami was a young novelist, he fell in love with certain people and obsessed over them. And I have assembled a free PDF of Murakami's favorite authors and novelists. And there are over 40. And if you would like to get that for free, all you have to do is go to the link down in the description below. But if you want to go deeper with Murakami, I run a Murakami course and book club where we are currently reading 1Q84. And every single week, we come together and talk about the novel. And I'm also posting course videos reviewing the novel. But we will very soon start reading more Murakami novels. And whenever you see this, remember that over on the Right Conscious Substack, if you want to talk about Murakami, we will be doing it. You also get access to the 10 plus other book clubs that are also always happening simultaneously, the writing group, and other courses. Plus, I host daily office hours where you can come talk to me about anything related to literature or the arts. And so I would love to see you guys over there if you are interested, and the link is down in the description below. Most people who read books want to be writers, but the only thing that's holding you back is not being able to be consistent and push yourself into that accountability. And a lot of the time, it's actually not what you think. I can sit here and rant about dopamine all I want. And be like, oh my God, the phones have ruined us, yada, yada, yada. But it's not that. It's that in general, we don't have the mental energy and space to be able to give 100% for 3 to 4 hours a day to writing, because we've never been trained to do that. And the easiest example I have for this is that most of you guys, not most of you, there's a subsection of you guys out there who aren't to blame. You may have a shitty boyfriend or girlfriend, a crappy job, some problem, and it's actually their fault. I was in a relationship for 2 years that was like emotionally abusive, and I had all the time in the world. I worked for this weird Asian security company with these like Asian dudes, and it felt like it was kind of like a mob situation. And we would do these security jobs where we would watch a construction site in the desert and we wouldn't show up. That was the gag. Like basically everyone was told low key by another worker, like, hey, just don't show up to this. And I would get a check every single month for $2,000. And I had that job for like 16 or 17 months before the show closed and the company just closed down one day. And so I had all the time in the world, but because I was in fights every day and there was all this crazy stuff happening, I barely wrote at all for those 2 years. And the week after I broke up with her, lo and behold, suddenly I started writing again. A couple months later, I had written 50 poems and multiple short stories and all these blog posts and started making actually videos for this channel. Nothing changed. There was no productivity hack or this or that. And my example is good for you. Because if you look at the amount of free time that you have every single week, so let's say you you work 40 hours a week and you sleep 8 hours a night. So 8 times 7 is 56. Let's add another 4 hours for commuting and stuff. That leaves you with 68 hours of free time a week. And so I tell my students all the time that if you take 30 of those hours a week and you use it to solve your own problems, to get away from your family, to solve whatever trauma, whatever addictions you have, if you're addicted to your phone, to porn, to weed, to cigarettes, to alcohol, if you need to gain strength like I did to break up with someone, use that free time to do that. And I highly doubt it's going to take you 7 years of applying yourself 30 hours a week to solve your own problems that are really holding you back, your trauma. But let's say it did. You will gain all that time back later because there are plenty of you guys out there whose bad habits, whose addiction to technology, to food and bad food that drains your energy, to negative patterns of mindset and negative partners have ruined your ability to have an artistic career. And you could solve that problem, but it's going to take time. And this is where real strength and fortitude is created, by clearing out your life, by making writing your central focus, because that is what Murakami is asking us to do here. Because when you look at professional athletes in 1910 who were competing in the Super Bowl, they did not make football their entire focus. They would go out and drink and eat whatever they wanted. They wouldn't train most of the year. They won't sleep 5 hours a night. But now when you look at professional athletes, everything is centered around the game. Everything is optimized. And we don't need to go here. You don't need to do that all the time in your life. A perfect example of this is last night, I actually filmed this video in full. I did at least this video and it was over 30 minutes long, but the file got corrupted because the program OBS is garbage. And I could have sat there and been like, oh my God, and freaked out. And I was just like, I'm just going to do it again. But while filming last night, my wife got some news from one of her family members that someone that they know had died, and she was super upset. So I hit the pause button and sat with her for over an hour during filming. I wasn't being a productivity bro, like, oh my God, I'll finish this video in a couple minutes and then we'll hang out. No, you have to be human. If someone wants to cuddle, if there's an opportunity to go do something, that's important. We don't need to be overly optimized. But the sole focus of your life, if you are trying to be a writer or an artist or whatever, should be that thing. Every other decision in your life should center around that. If you have a job that drains your energy, you will most likely never write anything that great unless you are very dedicated to it. But with a financial cut or some tinkering around, you could maybe find a job that gave you a lot more freedom. I know this personally because I used to work in a hellhole of a school years ago when I lived in Las Vegas. I would teach 60 kids out in a portable in the inner city of Las Vegas. It was the disaster. And even worse, I was getting micromanaged. There would be someone in my classroom every single period, like tinkering and critiquing me. And I would have to submit these lesson plans. It was crazy. I had no mental energy that year. The teaching job I'm in now, though, the kids are basically very chill. My bosses and my superiors talk to me about my plan. We go over what I'm doing, and they basically sign off, and they trust me to do what I'm going to do. And they come in and observe and talk to me and pop in and yada, yada, yada. But I have like zero stress. And there are plenty of jobs out there that, and teaching is a more intensive job where you could be freeing up space for mental energy. There are security jobs and hotel clerk jobs and a million other things that maybe aren't the most high paying jobs that you can do to start to build strength and fortitude. And a concept I'd also like to talk about in regards to all this time that you should maybe spend solving the problems in your own life before you actually start thinking about writing or really making a push to make that your dream. There's this concept of the open loop, that if there are things in your house that you have to do, if there's like dirty dishes over there, or your garage is disorganized, or you need to still reply to somebody, that's an open loop. And it's unconsciously kind of sucking some of your energy. And there's bigger open loops, obviously, than others. But if you spent a couple weeks finishing all the open loops in your life, you would be amazed about how much energy is opened up to you. But there's also an open loop with a lot of the decisions throughout your day. For instance, I plan all my work outfits 2 weeks in advance. I have 10 outfits planned, and then I do laundry after 2 weeks. I have all my personal outfits planned. I don't think about fashion at all. It's literally just on a cycle. I don't think about what I'm going to eat, meal prepping, recipes, all on a cycle. And there are plenty of other things in my life, and that has enabled me to have the space to film multiple videos a day, to release multiple course videos and run 10 book clubs a week, write a poem a day, a short story or essay a week, have a full-time job, have a family, have an exercise routine, all these different things, because there is everything that is somewhat mindless is just in a routine, and I don't have to think about it. And I can flow place to place in a clean house with no worries. And that helps me build the stamina, that gives me the stamina. So when I sit down to write, I can do it for hours. Today, I spent 4 hours revising some of my old poems, and I got like 10 done. And I sat there and I looked at the 10 poems, and I realized, I was like, I'm 99% done with the poetry book I'm going to release in 2024. And that's because I've been showing up every single day for years. And so I would recommend to spend that time as a writer to close all of that. And Murakami here was talking about physical fitness. And I want to mention one thing. And there is a law of diminishing returns when it comes to athletics. For instance, when I was 19 to 21 years old, I was heavily invested in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was living in Las Vegas, training with people in the UFC, world champions like Mikey Musumeci in Jiu-Jitsu. And 6 days a week, I was probably training 4 to 5 hours a day, and everything surrounding jiu-jitsu. And I was also attending school at the time and reading and doing some writing, but I had no energy for that stuff. I had like 3% of the energy I did before I started training full time and going crazy with it. And so that was way too much. And if I would have stuck with that lifestyle, I would still suck at writing, not have read or at least remembered or comprehended that many books. And so going full David Goggins with athletics is actually not very good for you if you're trying to be into art and writing, because there is a reservoir of energy that eventually gets tapped into. But there are some things that you can do. For instance, if you went and ran a 10K like Haruki Murakami does every single day, unless you are a runner, you'd be dead. If you went and ran the 6.2 miles, you'd be very sore. It would be taxing on you. And if you tried to do that every day or some form of running, it would be really hard. But once again, as I talked about earlier, that eventually after a month or two, you would start to feel fine, and it would actually be a net benefit. And that's something that's been problematic with me lately, is that I'm training for a strong first kettlebell certification, and it's a really hard certification. Like only 40% of people pass. You swing a kettlebell for 3 days straight, all day, and then at the end you have to do a snatch test where you do 100 snatches with a 54-pound kettlebell in 5 minutes, and every rep has to be perfect form. And so a couple weeks ago when I started training for that, I had no energy. I would show up to some of these videos, and maybe you guys watch them, I'd be like, but now my energy, maybe as you can tell, is way up, and now it's a net positive. Right before this video, I was swinging the kettlebell. So I know a lot of you guys probably don't have consistent workout routines, and so it will be hard. But another quick thing to know is writing position. If you guys can see here, I don't sit with a chair on my back. I'm always in a half lotus, full lotus, or some form of cross-legged posture. Or I write while standing. And that's because hunching over and writing all day is going to absolutely destroy you. And it does turn into an endurance activity. And so gaining the endurance to be able to do a lot of your writing or work standing, and gaining the the hip flexibility to be able to sit in a half lotus or cross-legged posture comfortably for hours, if you don't want to stand, will dramatically change how you feel while writing and actually be really good for your health. Even in these videos, I'm constantly doing butterfly stretches or like Virasana pose or like so many other things. And when I go to work and have to sit in the office chair, it's like terrible. And I refuse to, and I have to stand. And once again, it's hard to change. And I remember when I started using a standing desk for writing and like putting in at least half my time while standing, it was hard. And I really felt like I wasn't writing as well as I should have. I felt like I was at 70% capacity and I couldn't do it as long, and I'd have to take breaks. And so it's a kind of one of these things that you have to overcome also. It's going to take you maybe a month to be able to kind of feel 100% while writing while standing. And I cut out a section of this where Murakami kept saying, like, this is my personal opinion, because he was scared to fat shame. He didn't want to sit there and be like, he kind of got into it at the end, but you don't want to be an unhealthy writer, because let me tell you guys, you can do it. I've had friends who I went to school with who pop Adderall and don't exercise, and they're whizzes, and they've developed a decently successful career as professors and authors, but it is a ticking time bomb. Their life, their health is a disaster. Most of the people I went to school with were on a bunch of prescription drugs, SSRIs, Adderall, had drinking problems, had addictions, were fat. And you don't want that to be you, because most likely your best works aren't going to happen for the next couple decades. And if you have any health problem, if you have MS, or if you have a bad hip or a bad knee, most likely that's going to prevent you from writing well. Everybody isn't Dostoevsky. No, you have a hurt tooth or this pain in your stomach. The whole suffering artist thing really isn't right. I'm, for my poetry book, actually including the translations of Rilke's Sonnets to Orpheus. And I believe that Rilke is maybe the best poet of all time. And he wrote Sonnets of Orpheus and the Duino Elegies in, I think, 2 weeks. He got this massive bout of inspiration, and he hadn't written in years because he was very sick. And eventually, I think he shacked up in a castle, and suddenly his health problems went away, and he was like inspired. And suddenly, all this energy that had been so pent up let him finally write. But what a rarity. What if he didn't feel good? What if the weather was different and it got like really cold or something, and he never felt like that? Then we wouldn't have that. And so you want to set yourself up for the next couple decades to feel really well while writing. That's physical, spiritual, and mental. And a lot of writers that we actually like the men behind me who we respect on this channel, were very much into fitness. David Foster Wallace, daily exerciser. Cormac McCarthy would walk daily. Cormac McCarthy would write 5 novels at once. And the way he would switch is that he would go take a 30-minute walk between working on novels. Charles Dickens, huge walker. Franz Kafka would swim a mile every single day. Don DeLillo, huge runner. Stephen King, not a great writer or even a good writer, but still a daily walker. There are exceptions to this rule, but when you hear those names I just said, they stayed in the game for decades and had a pretty impressive output. There's a host of authors who have been, unhealthy and overweight, who died too early. One of my favorite science fiction authors, Octavia Butler, had a stroke and died at 58. I had a professor once tell me that the government killed Octavia Butler. That was crazy. I was like, what? And she's like, I can't talk about this. It's like, oh shit. And unfortunately for a lot of us, this is the 21st century, and we are going to have to put more effort into our writing than people of the past. All the names I just listed, guess how they got into the game? They just sent out their work and someone published it. And they went through some hard times, like Stephen King, Cormac McCarthy, even DeLillo. They had to grind a little bit, but in general, they were subsisting as full-time authors their entire life with no marketing required. But for you guys, unless you get super lucky, you are going to have to promote your book and yourself to some extent for a while. At some point, that should begin to snowball, and it shouldn't be as big of a thing. But you are going to have to put in a massive amount of energy, not just into writing, but into marketing your work. And I believe that you can do it. And I personally need you to do that, to create a literary renaissance. And to support you on that journey, I have created a free community for writers where I have courses on how to build your audience, how to improve as a writer, and how to write more. This is my baby. This is going to be the most important thing I ever do in my life, because I'm going to help activate so many authors just like you. So if you want to join, the link is down in the description below. It's called The Writing School on school.com. And over there, you guys can interact with me daily and join our writing challenges and so many other cool things. So I would love to see you over there. And I know a lot of people get the ick and they're like, oh my God, that ruins my artistic spirit. But once again, this is what strong writers do. Weak writers say things like that. Honestly, that's some weak shit. It's not hard to sit and say, read my stuff. This is what it's about. To send and make an Instagram reel. It's not fun. But it's the reality of what we are going to have to do if we want to transform the world with literature. If your work is worth two shits, if you aren't some fake boy artist releasing some shit, then you should want to tell people about your stuff. You should feel the inner empathy to say, oh, wow, other people's lives are going to be transformed by this. I need to go and do something about it. There's a local Tucson poet who I really look up to, and his name is Logan Phillips, and he puts on spectacular shows with his poetry and really cares about it. And if you go to one of his shows and say, hey, I'm broke, I can't buy your book, he'll give you all 5 of his books for free. And I'm not recommending that people do that, but he promotes the shit out of his work. But he is a real artist. He is one of the OG desert poets. And he's developed a whole show and a whole persona and a whole community that supports him, like me. And he's learned to make his own books and do sound effects for his live shows with his poetry. It's insane. That didn't happen overnight. He's been doing this for like 15 years. He's given back to the community and spoken at least to 100+ classrooms. That's why when he puts on a show or releases a book, a bunch of people show up. That's why people care. If he just released his poetry book on Kindle, no one would care. There'd be some people. I would maybe even find it because I'd research all the desert poetry. But it's weak to think that other people are going to do this for you, because that's what it is. When you say a publishing house is going to market it for me, of course that's great and that should be the dream. But that's you offsetting responsibility that you could be doing. And I think the unwillingness to do this kind of resonates with this lack of physical presence. If you have a physical presence in the world, if you have a mental presence and a spiritual presence, you are going to want to project that out to anyone who will listen. And people comment all the time and they say, that's what makes writers different, is that we don't do that. We resist the technology. And people who say that don't realize that writers have been on the forefront of technology and thoughts and ideas forever. I love when people talk about the canon. They're like, oh, cancel the canon, And when you look at the canon, even though it is a lot of dead white males, a lot of those dudes were the most progressive thinkers of the time. Like if there was a category, they were on the highly progressive side. And yes, there have been recluses. This isn't the arts. We aren't performing like theater people. We don't have that extrovertedness, but we just totally dropped the ball. And I think it's just because of the psychological mindfuck that you're sitting there and you're reading all these books. You're addicted to technology. You probably are, in your 20s or your 30s. And you look back and you're like, how the hell am I going to ever write like Cormac McCarthy or David Foster Wallace? And then I'm also going to have to promote myself and then get over all my own insecurities. If you learn to get out there and market yourself. I've learned more about myself learning and getting on this channel and promoting my Substack and my school course and my books eventually than almost any other endeavor. I've been an entrepreneur since 16 years old, but from ages 16 to 28, I lost like $50,000. I had a ski business. I had a yoga business. I had all these businesses and I sucked at it. But learning that money isn't this evil thing, but it's just an exchange of value. And it's a measure of the value that you're putting out in the world. It changed everything. When I learned that a lot of people only care about David Foster Wallace and Cormac McCarthy because of the persona that was built by the marketing agencies of the publishing house, then I was like, oh my God, I get to build my own persona and what people think of me, the first impressions. How fun is that? And that's the strength that we need. I'm not saying be like me. I make a lot of mistakes, and there are going to be people in the future, including some of you guys, that will surpass me on BookTube, in writing, and in life. But this is the general direction we need to be going toward. Feeling confident about ourselves, working on our writing, trying to get that to the highest level, but then also learning to speak and tell others about what we are doing because it's important. I literally feel like a fucking idiot having to say this. Like, it's so bizarre that there's so much resistance. I get 5 comments a day of people complaining, I don't want to do this. You can't stop Google. You can't stop the corporations unless we share and educate other people. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for all the support. Hopefully you took a couple things away from this video. I'm going to be explicating on a lot of this stuff. I'm going to have a course on like personal development and closing loops and all that stuff over on the school course. It's going to be endless. I can't really do that over here because I don't want to subject you guys to too much woo. But I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.